welcome back to Culture Conversations, the vodcast where we break down what's happening around workplace culture, behaviour and leadership. I'm George.
And I'm Macdara. This is episode 4 and our second on the survey which we recently conducted. Today we're going to dive into 2 topics, having done 2 in the last episode. So what are we going to be talking about today, George?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about feedback and recognition first, and then we'll go on to talk about from values to action, bridging the trust gap in leadership.
Great. Thanks, George. If you haven't had a chance to read the report, we will include it in today's show notes. So without further ado, let's jump in.
Okay, so the first topic we're going to dive into today is feedback and recognition. I think what would be really helpful, Macdara, would you mind just spending a minute explaining what we mean by this?
Yeah, of course. So taking them separately, feedback is that somebody in your organization, hopefully your boss, your line manager, is sitting down with you on a regular basis and telling you what you're doing well and what you're not doing very well in a constructive manner. So they're talking you through that with timely examples. That's important. And then on the recognition side, where you are doing well, that you're being recognized for that. So things that you've done well, you're being recognized by that line manager or the broader organization, that there are ways that recognition can happen.
Okay, so 2 things clearly that are important in a workplace dynamic for us as employees and as leaders as well.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. I guess, would you be able to then share with us a little bit around what the survey told us?
Yeah, absolutely. So here, this was one of the most positive, kind of responses that we had in the survey. Here we asked the question, I feel that feedback and recognition are given fairly and regularly in my team. So 64% of respondents responded positively to that. So either strongly agreed or agreed to that statement. 36% had a negative response. So great, that 2/3 of people who completed the survey had a very positive view on that. Slightly worrying that, over 30% had a negative view on that. So, either they're not getting feedback or that it's, maybe not where they'd want it to be. So across the general comments, that was a key demotivator for people. So it's clear that feedback and recognition motivate people. The other side of that is if people aren't getting them, can be a really big demotivating factor for people. And that was a really strong theme for folks. We've all been, if you're working hard, you want to feel that people can see that and that you're being, recognized for that by, as I said, by your own line manager, or by the broader organization. So some people even felt within that recognition piece that there were other people taking credit for their work. So, that's obviously the very negative end of that, but we've all seen examples of that. Sometimes you put the presentation together, you don't get to go to the meeting. Someone maybe more senior presents your deck at the meeting and you're left there sitting going, wow, thanks a lot. I've put that work in. I've got none of the positive piece that went with that piece of work. And on the negative end of the feedback was, inconsistency around that. So in terms of how often it was happening and that, it wasn't giving them the clarity that they needed to improve in their roles. So that feedback needs to be happening very consistently for it to be effective. And people, there's a real yearning for that. And as I said, where it was happening, people, that really jumped out from the survey, that the positive impact that had on people, where they were getting that recognition, getting that feedback. They're more engaged, they're more positive on the organization. They're going to be more inclined to work and deliver within their role.
That's really interesting, and it always feels that when something receives a large amount of positive sentiment, maybe we don't focus on it as much, but actually we would argue that maybe where something receives very strong positive sentiment, we can actually double down on that as an organisation. We can really invest in that, and it becomes a good opportunity for us to do even better.
Yeah, and for folks within their own organisation, learning how that can drive, real impact within the business, that improved engagement, means real business results as well.
Yep.
That's something to take to the folks maybe in your business who think this is all a bit fluffy and not about the bottom line, but we know that it can really make a big difference. And there's some obviously stats within the report that back that up.
Okay, so you spoke about making a difference. If it's an area that, as an organisation, I might want to focus on, what are some of the key actions and next steps that I might want to consider?
Well, first of all, making sure that people in your organisation know how to give feedback, right? So you can have some sort of feedback fluency program where you're training individuals in how to give feedback. That takes time, to learn how to do that effectively. So making sure people have been trained and are comfortable, right? That's having difficult conversations, giving feedback to people that's constructive, and that you're supporting them with that. People appreciate that. Feedback done badly, can really demotivate. So, there's a lack of feedback, and there's also feedback given maybe too bluntly with no support. What am I supposed to, you've given me this feedback, I don't know how to fix it. It may be a blind spot for somebody, so you've totally derailed them by giving them this feedback. So ensuring leaders and managers in your organization know how to give feedback and how to help people work on those items. Some sort of recognition program. So, within your organization, are there forums? Is there a place where people are being recognized, on a small day-to-day level within the team and the broader organization? So taking a look at that, what's someone done really well in your team this week that they could be recognized for? Is that done on a quarterly or an annual basis? And making sure that that's something that everyone's actively involved in and asking about, looking for things that people should be recognized for and making sure that they are. And toolkits for managers is something also that can be very helpful to make sure that they know how to give the feedback, they know when to give it. So just giving everyone the tools they need to be effective in this area.
Okay, so if I just play that back to ensure my understanding then. So having the right level of knowledge and understanding around giving feedback itself, and also, I guess, receiving feedback.
Yeah, true.
The recognition piece, clearly it means something different to a lot of people, but at least having a model in place to recognise people so that they feel, their efforts are being rewarded and recognised, and that it's not just going kind of, being going under the carpet.
Yeah.
And then the third piece being having that, toolkit or structure in place to support that process of giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. So it's really important that it's embedded in the organisation. Everyone's clear on how it should be working and when it should be working, and then they can see that, and that's consistent through the business. So, George, the next topic we're going to discuss is values to action and leadership trust. So, can you maybe explain that in layman's terms, kind of what we think that means and how that looks in an organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's kind of stating the obvious a little bit when we say that effective leaders lead by example.
Yeah.
Right. But actually, I think that is something that needs to be reinforced. A leader that embodies the vision, the values that they want and expect to see in others, and they demand that they see in others, is really important. Because if you have someone who, talks the talk and they expect a certain behaviour or set of behaviours of their team, but then they act in a different way themselves, not only does it compromise trust, it can also create resentment. It can break down kind of organisational structures, lead to inefficiency. Ultimately, people will leave the organisation. So I guess, leaders lead is a very kind of commonly used sentence or phrase, but we really cannot underestimate the importance of leaders embodying those values, those behaviours, those things that they expect in others, and that then has a clear link through to engagement, performance, retention, etc.
Yeah, okay. That definitely makes sense, how you've laid it out there. What then was the feedback through the survey? How did people feel about this topic?
Yeah, so actually this kind of conclusion that we had actually sits across two questions. The good news is that this was one of the strongest positive sentiments that came back from kind of the survey responses. So the first question that this applies to is leaders in my organisation model the values they expect from others, and 70% of survey respondents said that they either strongly agreed or agreed with that sentiment.
Yep.
And then question 5 was, there is a clear link between leadership behaviour and team performance in my organisation, and it was actually 77% of survey respondents that said they strongly agree or agree with that. So you have that leadership kind of behaviour, that leadership expectation, and what we've seen in the survey at least is a good example of where that is positively playing through into kind of organisational performance.
Yeah, so it's kind of two-parter. One, are leaders in your organisation doing what they said they would do?
Yeah.
And secondly, where they are, is that having a positive effect on the organisation?
Yeah.
Okay, great. What then can you do if you're a leader in an organisation where that isn't happening? So leaders aren't doing what they said they would do, and then obviously that's then having a negative impact on the organisation. What can you do there?
So I think there's quite a bit that can be done. That's not to give you a politician's answer. I will give specific examples. So one thing that we've seen work quite well is leadership alignment workshops.
Yep.
And that is avoiding making the assumption that because we as leadership have a belief or a set of behaviours we expect, that others know about them.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to make sure that that alignment exists across the organisation. That can start with the leadership team, that can start bottom up, but actually it's just making sure that what is being said is being kind of followed through.
Yeah.
Something around shadowing can also be quite impactful. So as leaders, I think there can be a temptation to maintain distance.
Yeah.
And to be, when we were obviously working in an open office environment, some of the leadership would be away in their offices.
Yeah.
Actually being able to walk the floors, talk to people, shadow people, and see what is going on a day-to-day basis, being able to be, out with those that are doing the work can be really impactful.
Yeah.
And it means that you can actually talk to them from a position of understanding what it is they're doing,
Yeah.
rather than it being a leadership mandate that comes on high. You're slightly closer to the detail.
Yeah.
The next one sounds really formal, and you can make it formal, but you could equally make it quite informal, and that's an integrity audit.
Okay.
So that is really looking to hopefully see alignment between leadership values, behaviours, both at a leadership level and across the organisation.
Yeah.
But it's also across the organisation, maybe looking for examples of misalignment.
Yeah.
And that might be quite subtle, but it also might be something quite severe.
Yeah.
But then having an action plan, something that could actually be done to make a difference. It could be small, could be big, but it's tightening up any differences between what leadership expect and what is actually happening on the ground.
Okay.
And maybe one more I would give is actually around coaching.
Yeah.
So obviously you and I have been in and around this industry probably longer than we care to admit, but actually the ability to have someone there to kind of look at your ways of working, performance, and to coach you to do things better, smarter, differently, can be really impactful. It enables you to step away from the day-to-day, so that you can say, I'm asking behaviours of people, am I doing them myself? Is there anything I need to change? But also the way I'm communicating my expectation to people, does something need to slightly shift in order for that to be more impactful?
Yeah, okay. So to play that back, I'm getting alignment through the organisation being really key there in terms of seeking alignment the integrity audit and the shadowing plays into that too, right? To understand what's happening.
Yep.
And then having a good view on yourself, I suppose being honest with yourself around how you're living the values that you're asking the organisation to meet, and that you are being very clear around how you're performing against those yourself.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, so we've covered 2 topics there. The final 2 topics that we intend to cover from our survey and our report. Macdara, did you just want to give us your key takeaways from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, as we said, these were the more positive end of things, and really, it's kind of, not to get wee people, kind of life affirming in a way, that the power of, feedback and recognition, and, where there is trust in leadership that are doing what they said they were going to do. We all spend a lot of time at work, and, it's really interesting to see how engaged people can be if the leadership of that organisation is meeting the values that they have talked about. So that was, for me, really, really powerful and really positive thing to see.
Okay, fantastic. So obviously, as ever, we want to thank people for taking the time to tune in, to watch, to listen. For our next topic, we're actually going to ask you guys what you'd like us to talk about.
Yep.
So after this episode has been released, we'll publish a short poll or survey to try and gather some ideas, and then we'll look to record that for you guys based on kind of what comes back out of that. Yeah. So just thank you to everyone, and with that we'll say goodbye from him.
And goodbye from me.